So, nice and simple. I'll do a little quick introduction. So this is Kevin. Kevin's going to come and he's got his own presentation, which I'll switch over to in a minute. Kevin has been coaching at university probably for about, I'd say 3 years now, actually.
Actually about 4 years.
About 4 years. Kevin runs a local marketing and PR agency, very well recognised, very well thought of, and he's also one of our 30 entrepreneurs in residence. So he's one of the people that we bring in to talk to students, talk to people in our wider network of business community about being entrepreneurial. And as a consequence of being entrepreneurial, Kevin is a very enterprising person, but also very well suited to the talk and the competencies today because, well, I'll let him explain, but in marketing, one of the very first things you nearly always need to do is research to work out where your audience is and how you're going to talk to them before you even leap into the whole kind of affair. If you're going to be successful and do it well, that is. I'm sure Kevin can give you plenty of examples, or people haven't, if you were so asked him. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks very much to all of you for having me along today. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit for 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, just a bit about my story, my career, and so on, and try and couch it, as Peter said, really couch it in terms of those competencies that were mentioned a little earlier. So to start with, I'm a journalist by training. I worked as a journalist for nearly 10 years. I'm not a natural choice to have been a journalist. I was a bit shy, a bit introverted. I'm kind of surprised anybody ever gave me a job, to be honest, ever gave me a job in journalism, because it wasn't something that came naturally to me. And one of the things I really had to think about was, in that role, just thinking about what I wanted to achieve, but also why I was doing it and what the motivations of our customers at the time, the people who read the newspapers, and what they were motivated by. After about 10 years working in journalism and working in newspapers, I then became a press officer. But having been a journalist for 10 years, it was poacher turned gamekeeper. So I've called myself here the Bolshie press officer. It's kind of trying to keep journalists in their place. And when you've just been a journalist, that's quite a difficult job to do. But anyway, you have to think then about, my audience had changed completely. I recognised that journalists have a very particular audience of people that they're trying to communicate with all the time. And as a press officer, my role was to communicate to journalists and communicate in a different way, and in a way that helped them, but also looked after the organisation that I was a press officer for. So did that for a number of years, actually became the head of the department there. Again, I kind of found myself thrust into this position with, trying to develop my own level of confidence, I suppose, in the role, and trying to really push myself out of my comfort zone, to challenge people, to think about all of those issues when they come up, how I was thinking about them, how I was going to deal with them, and how I was going to manage them, how I was going to handle senior management as I was leading a department that was the kind of conscience of the organisation, making sure that senior leaders within the organisation didn't go off down a track that was going to get us into trouble later, making sure that I was really thinking very carefully and in quite a lot of detail about all of those issues, and trying to have that foresight and looking much further down the track at what are those problems that could occur and how could that affect the organisation, and is there something that we could do about it right now, right at this moment, that would change that end result. After a while, I then left that organisation and set up my own business, I kind of didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur until the university approached me to become an entrepreneur in residence. I kind of just thought, I'm just running a business. But actually running a business, starting it from scratch, I didn't go into a business that was already established. I just said, okay, we'll start a PR agency. So started the business from scratch, started thinking about where are we going to get customers from, our clients, how are we going to sell the services that we provide to them, and how we're going to measure our success. And that was quite a difficult time just initially, just trying to get that off the ground. We didn't get it right. We didn't get it right first time, that's for certain. And to be honest, we kind of revisit all of those different aspects every single year. I still don't say that we've absolutely got it perfected. Every single year we come back to it and we think again, what else could we do? How else do we need to change? What else could we do that's a bit better? So for those of you who don't know what public relations is a kind of managing the communications and managing the reputation of an organization. So it's in its simplest form, people think PR people are just chucking out press releases. We're writing press releases for a business or an organization and sending that out, getting media coverage, reporting back on it. It's a lot more, there's a lot more to it, and that's a tiny, tiny aspect of what we do. What we do is work with that business to help in its messaging. What does it say about the business? How does it communicate with its customers? How does it work out who its customers are? That's our clients, not us, our clients. How do we work out who those customers are? And how do we work out how to communicate with them effectively so that they build up a really favorable impression of that organization and that business and the organization or the business, so that they want to be associated with it in whatever way, whether it's as a customer because they're buying goods or buying products, or whether it's as a supporter, someone who uses its services. So one of the important things, most important things that we do in public relations is that whole customer profiling. We're working with a client right now actually to look at how we can increase footfall to their business. It's a shop. It's a very, very successful shop and doing really, really well, but they want to increase their footfall. Their customers come from about a 10, 15 mile radius of the shops. They want to increase that to 20, 25 miles radius. So what we're doing is quite a lot of survey work, trying to understand who their customers are at the moment, what motivates them, what makes them think, I want to go and do my shopping at that shop. It's a farm shop, it's out in the Meon Valley, just near Fareham. It does really, really well. And we're spending quite a bit of time just looking at their whole customer base. So we want to know why people choose them rather than choose one of the other stores. So we want to know all that information about who are their customers. Now, at the moment, their customers walk in the door, pick up their goods, pay at the till, and walk away. We would need to know so much more information about them, about what's motivated them to come there and get in through the door in the first place. So, you know, we want to know, what do they like? What works for them? What do they want? And how do they like to be communicated with? Do we send them a newsletter once a month? Do they like to pick up all their information off social media? Are they Facebook users, or are they TikTok users, or are they Instagram users? Or maybe they use all of them. But unless we know, how do we know how to communicate with them? So we really, really want to know what they're interested in. And a lot of this applies to us as a business as well. So we spend quite a lot of time looking inwards to ourselves, because we're always on the lookout for new clients. We want to get new clients all the time. So we're always thinking about, you know, why do people choose us to be their PR agency? You know, and we ask them all the time. If someone contacts us, how did you hear about us? Why have you asked us? Because we really want to know. That information is so valuable and so important, because you know then what's working in terms of your own marketing, what is actually doing the job for you. I talked a little earlier about PR, a PR professional being the conscience of the organisation, and they really are. They need to be working at the very highest levels of the organisation, right up where those key decision makers of that business or that organisation are making those decisions. because they advise about those pitfalls that might be hiding around the corner, the things that people might not be expecting, the dangers that are ahead, how to avoid that reputational damage that could destroy the business. A lot of you probably in this room are too young to remember a guy who ran a jewellery chain years ago. His name was Gerald Ratner. And if you go in a high street and you see H. Samuels in the high street, it was kind of the same as that, but they were called Ratners, and they were everywhere. Literally every single town had one. They were doing an amazing amount of business until, probably without the advice of a PR officer, he stood up at a conference, kind of a bit like this, like I'm doing now, and talked about, just flippantly, off the cuff, talked about how people were buying the crap that he sold. And suddenly it was in all the papers. You know what, that business disappeared in about a year, really just disappeared because people just stopped buying. So there's someone who said something at a conference, spoke just like me right now, said something, destroyed his business. And that's really easy to do. So we spend a lot of time advising, encouraging, warning people about what they should or shouldn't say. Have a look at, you just have to see what's in the news about what's going on with P&O ferries at the moment. I kind of like to think that they didn't have any PR advice. They might have had some PR advice, but I kind of hope that they didn't, because that's kind of not great on the profession. But, to take the decision they did, the damage, the long-term damage that's going to cause to their brand and to their industry is really, really significant. And a PR advisor working at the top level would have said, don't do that. We really mustn't do that. If we've got to make a decision like this somehow, we need to find a different way of doing it. Another example that I've got, that I've used here, is the gender pay gap bot. People in the room, do people know what I'm talking about when I talk about that? Have you seen that? I thought it was really, really interesting. On International Women's Day, the week before last, I think it was, all those lots and lots of businesses out there started tweeting about how they were all signed up to all the values of International Women's Day and treated all their staff equally and fairly and so on, without realizing that somebody somewhere had developed this bot that essentially retweeted anybody who used the International Women's Day hashtag, and at the same time detailed what the difference in median pay was between men and women in that organization. It's really quite interesting to see the number of organizations that took their tweets down as a result of that. So you end up with just the gender pay gap bot message and the thing below. But equally interesting is the ones that didn't. They didn't take it down. They're the kind of people who just chuck their social media out and then don't really care what sort of impact it's had or what influence it's had, and not really check to see whether anybody's picked up on it. So, what we tend to do in PR is try to see the positive in everything as much as we can, try and find the positive, and really, really try to avoid the negative. And that means really spending a lot of time thinking about the problems that we've got in front of us. And they might be problems for us as a business, but they're usually the problems of our clients. What issue have they got at the moment? And what can we do to make a difference and improve their reputation, or handle and manage the crisis, manage the fallout from the crisis? We've done quite a lot of work with NATS, which is the air traffic control company for the UK. And from very, very occasionally, they have a crisis with some of their IT systems, which causes a problem to aviation throughout the country. And we have to then think about, what are we going to do and how are we going to help manage that crisis and what's happening. And we also need to think about what else can we do with our clients to really get people talking about them. One of our clients, a smaller client, but still doing quite very, very well, is a pet store, pet accessory store, just over on the outskirts of Southampton. And they started stocking a new product, which was a particular coat for dogs. It's called Pompo. It's from Finland. It's exclusive to them, so nobody else in the country retails this coat. So would have been in a bit of demand, but it was just a new product coming into the store, one of 7,000 products that they've got in this store. But how can we kind of think about doing something a bit different and making a difference from it? So as soon as we knew these coats were coming in, very bright colours, all of these coats, by the way, happened to coincide in by January, February time, which I think is around about the time of London Fashion Week. So we organised to have a dog fashion show where they would parade up and down wearing the coats. You wouldn't believe the amount of publicity we got for that. Huge amount of take up for dogs wearing these fancy coats, walking up and down a catwalk, showing them off. You know, great result for the store. Suddenly everybody knows exactly where they can get these coats from if they want to get one. They go and get them from there. So with reference to problem analysis, excuse me, we spend a lot of time talking to our clients and thinking about this ourselves as well, about thinking about really getting to the root of the problem. What actually is the problem? And it might not necessarily be the thing that's literally staring them in the face right then. There might be some other cause. What is the reason for the outcome that's presented for them at that very moment? So we spend a lot of time with our clients really trying to think, what is actually the problem here? Let's really get to the bottom of it. It's really easy when you're faced with the problem to just have a knee-jerk reaction and just think, oh my God, there's a problem. Let me just deal with that right now as an issue, without actually thinking, what are the underlying issues? What actually led to that problem surfacing? What caused the issue in the first place? And so we spend a long time with clients just talking about what those issues are, the issues that they're facing at that time, and how can we, with a bit of creativity and creative ideas and thoughts and so on, come up with a solution. And sometimes it's thinking the unthinkable, coming up, you know, quite often people will say in business and in all sorts of places, there's no such thing as a bad idea, and there really isn't. You know, come up with the wildest ideas, because actually, suddenly you might think, actually, you know what, I think we could probably have a go at that, and that could really work. But unless someone comes forward with the idea, because they've really thought about what the problem is and thought about how they can come up with a solution, you know, it might be that you never get anywhere. So always think about, really, even in your wildest dreams, what would be the solution to the issue? A couple of little case studies here. We were engaged by a school, which is an independent school. It's based in Suffolk, but it has a bursary system which it offers to the sons and daughters, children of seafarers, largely people who are in the Royal Navy. And they have a certain number of bursaries to give out every year, which means that those children can go for free to this school. It's an amazing school over in Suffolk. Now they had a real drop-off in people applying for the bursary and really wanted to get their numbers up. So they came to us and said, how are we going to do this? We just need people to apply for the bursary, but they've got to be from the Royal Navy, and they've got to have children who are around about 10 years old, because they're coming to secondary school, or 10 years old or older. So we spent a long time with them thinking about, okay, what is it you want? You actually want to get more applications, but you really want to get the best applications. You don't just want loads of applications. You don't want everybody in the Royal Navy to apply. You actually want the people who you think will succeed, the people who are in need, in some sort of need, some sort of have some sort of requirement that will satisfy the rules of the bursary. so that they will say, actually, you know what, that is a deserving cause and we want to do that. So we started off with a real campaign of advertising and social media and being really targeted in this area, Portsmouth, Gosport, Fareham, because it's big Royal Navy area, Plymouth as well, to really focus in on that. And I have to say, it was a fantastic success. Suddenly did have too many applications than they could handle, but it's better to have that than too few. And the other issue we had was VE Day commemorations, which were not long after the first lockdown started, so 2 years, just less than 2 years ago. And Fareham Borough Council, so before the lockdown, the first lockdown, local authorities were told to really get out there and promote VE Day, get lots of street parties, all sorts of things going on, bunting up in streets, everything going on. Lockdown comes, suddenly all of that canned. But councils still wanted to be able to do something. So again, we worked with Fareham Borough Council and did a whole load of stuff about what people could do during lockdown and how they could do stuff. So we had how you could have a street party at home, just in your back garden. We got bunting that we put online so they could just print it off and do whatever they wanted with that. We had song sheets printed with all sorts of things, just did everything so that there was like a complete pack that people could just download from the council website and use that for their VE Day commemoration at home. So, you know, and the end result was the council could quite happily stand up and say, look, we did a huge amount, and a huge number of people took advantage of the resources that we were able to provide so that they could still mark this, even though we were in the middle of the first lockdown. So probably the most important thing that we think about in public relations is audience and who is in our audience. And that includes whether they're an external audience or an internal audience. So in a big organization like this, say, for example, the University of Portsmouth has a huge number of staff, so it has a really big internal audience, and they are communicated with in a particular way. But it also has a huge external audience. So all the people who live in the city or in the wider environment will be communicated with in a different way by what the university wants to say. And it's really important, and we say this to all of our clients, to be really clear about each of those people, what do they want and how do they want it? How do they want to be communicated with, and what sort of communication do they want? So not everything works for everybody. We talk to a lot of businesses who use all of the channels of social media. They use Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, anything else as well. You know what? The only one that ever really works for them is LinkedIn. Okay, why are you spending, you know, all that time you spend doing all these other things? Why are you doing that? Oh, we kind of thought we should. Why are you doing that? Your audience isn't on it. Your audience doesn't use it. They don't care what you might be saying on there. It's having no effect and no impact. Why are you using it? So not everything works for everybody. So being particular and thinking about who your audience is and how you communicate with them is really, really key. If you're doing something or running a business that's targeting pensioners, people 60 plus, you're going to use a different form of communication than if you were targeting teenagers, because they're getting their information from very different locations and very different places. So really be really clear about all aspects of your audience and who they are, whether it's their age, whether it's where they live, whether they work or not, what sort of work they do, what their household income is, and all of those sorts of things. So in conclusion, I just like to say research is absolutely critical to all businesses. It's really critical to PR business, but all businesses are doing research all the time just to really understand their market and their audience and who are the people who are buying their products and buying their services. So really, really be clear about who your customers are, how you communicate with them, what you actually communicate to them, and how do you change their behavior. There's no point sending out a whole load of communication if actually nobody does anything as a result of it. What sort of engagement do you get? How do people change their behavior based on what you're saying and what you're doing and what you're telling them? And my key takeaway, I guess, from this to all of you is always, always think about your audience, your customers, and your potential customers.
In audience terms, you talked about deciding what your client wants. How do you do that? What process do you go through?
Yeah, so you spend a lot of time actually listening to people, listening to what they're saying, listening to what your audience is talking about. And these days, it's quite easy to do that because your audience will be online somewhere. So you can find out what is motivating them, what sort of things they're talking about, what are the issues that are concerning them at that time. You can really do that. You can do surveys. With the shop that we're working with at the moment, we're surveying all the customers. So every customer that comes in gets a survey to take away. We're also doing it online as well and trying to run the survey as widely as possible. But yeah, just talking to them and listening to them and contacting them and just asking for their views and feedback.
And I suppose probably a bit of a follow-on question there, which is last week we looked at as soon as, and Simon talked about giving things a go and working on a budget and just getting going and starting. Do you wait until you've got all this information in one place, or will you sometimes dip a toe in the market to find something out and then decide where to go from there? How do you sort of approach that?
Yeah, so sometimes you will just you'll get a feel for what works and what doesn't work, and you'll give it a go and you'll have a go at it, you'll maybe get some early feedback and think, yeah, let's try that. Or you'll have a gut instinct and think, well, let's just give it a go, but always measure. So if you're doing something, always measure it. So if you've tried something, measure it. Because if you don't measure it, how do you know whether it's worked or not? And we talk to our clients all the time about that, about their social media. So many businesses do their social media and never measure it. I kind of think, you've got no understanding at all of what works and what doesn't work. Social media is largely about dipping your toe in the water. You try something. If it works, you do more of it. If it doesn't work, stop it and do less and do something else. Try and do something else to make it different and make it more engaging. And that's only based on measurement and being clear about what the outcomes of your behavior are.
There's a couple of questions coming through online. One says, what tools and methods can we use to help us research clients? You can listen using the social media tools. So what are your people, the people you want to target, what are they saying? You need to be in their communities and listening to what's going on, kind of lurking really, and just try and get a feel of what sort of things they're talking about, what's motivating them, and so on. Surveys, if you've got a database of information. If you haven't got a database, you need to try and gather those emails somehow. If you're running a business, the way that we would normally do that is have some sort of a giveaway on the website, maybe some sort of thought leadership document or some sort of workshop or tips or whatever that people have to use their email to sign up to get a copy of. And you build up a database of people who are already interested and engaged with your business. But doing those sorts of surveys as well will give you really valuable information. So we got here, when profiling your audience and clients, do you make educated guesses, an average client, or do you use real people to profile?
Yes, I don't think we ever really guess. We kind of want to know the detail. So I think if you go on your assumptions too much, then there's a chance you will come a cropper. You really want to be kind of sure of your ground, especially working with clients. Clients spend good money with us, and if we're just doing stuff on our gut instinct, then I kind of think they might turn around and say, I'm not sure that was money well spent, especially if it goes wrong. Because if you try something just based on your gut instinct and it doesn't work out, how are you going to be able to justify that. I kind of think you need to be quite firm on your ground.
There's another one here, actually. It says, great question, totally new business. How can I research who my customer will be? I might think I know, but how can I come up with an actual target? And I suppose putting it a slightly different way, or putting a spin on it, which is if you're bringing something brand new to the market and perhaps going and asking your customers, they wouldn't say that they need it because perhaps it doesn't exist already. How do you evaluate that kind of customer need?
Yeah, I mean, so with that, I kind of think you probably want to work in, get some focus groups together, get some people that you think are going to be your target audience, the sort of people who are going to use your service or buy your product, and run a series of groups where you get them to try it out and give it to them, let them play with it, let them have a go with it and feedback some information to you. That's how you'll gather some really good information about people from cross-section of different types of people from the audience, members of the public. So that sort of thing would usually work quite well.
There's a few more questions online, but has anyone in the room got any questions? Yeah.
In the beginning, how did you find your first customers? And how much research do you do before getting into it?
So just to repeat that for people online. So the question was, in the beginning, how did you find your first customer, and how much research did you do to find those customers?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we were quite lucky. I was quite lucky because it was just me to start with. I was quite lucky in that I met someone just having a coffee actually, and just got talking to them. Turned out they were a comms director at an organisation that needed some interim support. So I got the opportunity to go and do that. Immediately started bringing some money in. Then started thinking about, okay, so how can we take that and start doing it elsewhere? And it kind of snowballed from there. Never really looked back, to be honest, since then, because we've continued to just pick up work by having those conversations with people and talking to people. And sometimes, I think right at the very beginning, I talked about me being the shy journalist. Sometimes you've got to push yourself out of the comfort zone because, it's this sort of thing doesn't come naturally to me. Standing up in front of a room of people and talking like this, you kind of do it because you kind of think, if I don't do it, I ain't going to earn any money. Not that I'm getting paid for this, by the way. But if you don't do it, if you don't push yourself out there, if you don't push yourself out there, and tell people who you are and what you do and how great you are at it, then why would anybody come and buy something from you? They ain't going to. So you've got to do it, and actually, and it might be hideous to you, and it might be the sort of thing that you think, I couldn't think of anything worse to do. But you know what? If you're going to do this, you've got to do it. So get out there and do it. And the other part of your question was the research.
Yeah, how much research did you do into what you want to do?
Yeah.
Or how did you know?
Oh, that's about research into what I wanted to do. You know what? Hardly any. So, probably not the right answer, but this is the truth. I didn't do very much. But I kind of knew, it's kind of, I started off in journalism and then gone into corporate comms, and then it's kind of natural really to do what I do now, to sort of, it's kind of the next step. So I kind of guess I probably had 20 years of experience that got me to that stage to then make the decision to set up the agency. But kind of related to that, when we're working, if we've got the opportunity to talk to a potential new client, so if someone gets in touch with us and says, we're quite interested, can you tell us a little bit about what you do? We really hit that hard in terms of doing our research. We want to know everything about that business. We're on the company's house page, checking out their accounts. We're on all of their social media feeds, going back months and months and months, seeing what sort of things they're talking about, what's interesting to them, what do they do, what makes them tick. We look at all their media coverage that they might have had. We do everything. We do lots of research into individuals as well. So, so finding out about who those people are in the business and what matters to them, because that, when you're in there pitching to someone or you're writing a proposal, you want to be touching those points that matter to them all the time.
There's one on here about helping, it's gone off again, but one was about how you measure the impact of the advertising or activity that you do. So I think you touched on why you're not measuring your social media you're doing. And it says here, how can we measure the impact of physical advertising methods or combined approaches?
Yeah. So I think that's quite hard. So advertising, especially advertising, is not our thing really, but you know, it's we're much more about earning coverage. Really, we do spend a bit, we do advertise a little bit, but some of our clients sometimes say, "Oh, we've got the opportunity to advertise in this newspaper or that magazine or whatever," and I always say to them, "Okay, well, tell me what results you're going to get as a result of that." And what results are they going to present back to you? And if they're just talking about the number of impressions that your article has had on their newspaper website, I kind of think, well, what value is that? What value is it? You know, just because someone's seen it doesn't mean they're going to take any action, not doing anything, not change their behavior. I think it's really hard to measure the impact of your advertising unless you actually get right in there and survey the people who saw that advert to find out whether or not it resonated with them, whether or not it changed their minds, changed their behavior.
There's one here, it's I suppose not research related, but it's an interesting question. Hoping to start a business when I have no proven experience. Do you think I have to work pro bono or create a portfolio or take it to my first client? Tricky.
Yeah, that is tricky. So I kind of, yeah, that's a tricky one. So really, when you're going to see a client, they'll want to see whether you've done this sort of stuff before. You know, there will be the occasional clients who will take a chance on you and just say, well, yeah, you seem like a nice guy or girl, or you seem like a nice person. Yeah, come on, then we'll pay you a bit of money, then let's give it a go and see whether it works. Very unlikely. It's not going to happen very often. So you need to have got some sort of experience behind you. Doing a bit of pro bono work for a charity or a really good cause that probably couldn't actually afford to have a PR person or marketing person or whatever is a really nice thing to do. It's nice for you to be able to do it. It's good for the charity if you make a difference for them and you get a portfolio. The one thing I would definitely say don't do is do work for nothing. You know, if you're doing stuff for a charity because you're driven by the values of that charity, then great, perfect, that's great. You know, we do pro bono work for charities, some charities. We are happy to do that because we like to be associated with the values of those charities. But if someone, and this, I feel quite strongly about this, is if someone comes and asks you to do free work, then I kind of think you shouldn't do it. But I know that's quite hard for people, but I kind of think if you're going to do work that's going to add value to that organisation, you get paid for it.
I'd agree. I would add to that, Robert, that before jumping down that, dip your toe in the water and ask for some money, see what they will actually do. Yeah. And there are other options you can consider. So you could consider, for example, being paid upon completion to set criteria to a certain standard, you know, or you could even consider being, if you're working in marketing, so you could being paid upon a set of criteria, of impact criteria, like measurements and everything else. But I would echo what Kevin has said there, because often once you get into the groove of working for free, it becomes quite hard to get out of it. It becomes a default position. Before you know it, you've gone through a whole year of activity, not achieved very much, and have a reputation for either working cheaply or for free, and that is a difficult one to get out of.
Yeah, and I think it also just shows that whoever it is, especially if it's a commercial organisation, they don't really value what you're doing anyway. If they valued it, they'd pay you.
I had a comedy question that I've just written down, which was, can you give us an example of the most unusual or most comedic customer profile you've ever had to look at? What sort of stood out and said, oh, that's a bit different?
Let me think. I can't think of one. I can't think of one that's
quite
really
mundane, is it?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, a lot of our business, they're sort of kind of businesses, and have we had anything that's really stood out? We've been asked a few times to do some PR for people, and we've said, I don't think they'll do that. You know, the sort of organising kind of thing. No, they don't. They're not. Shall we say? Our response to them was, I don't think we're a good fit for you, which kind of means I'm not touching you with a barge pole, because they might have the sort of values that don't align with what we do as a business, or we kind of think they're not telling us the truth as well, and that happens sometimes. They kind of talk a bit more about who they are and what they can do, and it's not, you kind of just get a feeling I worked as a journalist for 10 years. I can kind of tell when someone's not quite telling me exactly the truth, and I can usually smell that.
Any questions in the room or any more questions online? Yeah. Oh, yep, over there. While I do a bit of a switch over.
Off the back of what you just said there, that do you find that easier now that you're established and you've got that experience of being in PR, that at the beginning, did you find it hard? Did you kind of just say yes to a lot more people to get that portfolio and get that experience? Whereas now, for want of a better term, you can be a bit more picky and choosy, and you've got the resources behind you to enable you to look into that organisation, person, whoever it might be, and then make that conscious decision that if it doesn't align with you and what your business is, then no, I'm sorry, but you're not for me, type thing. How did you sort of get over that? And did you have any experience of just cracking on with that, even if you didn't quite because you were new to it?
Yeah. So just for those online, the short version is probably, are you more confident now in doing those things than you were when you started?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say, you know what? Yeah, when we started, we worked with some terrible clients. You know, terrible. You know, because we kind of we were a bit naive. We kind of just said, yeah, we'll do that, and usually, not always, but usually it was the ones who paid the least who caused the most trouble. They were the most demanding, expected you to be on call 24/7, but pay an absolute fraction of what your normal rate might be. So we did work with lots and lots of businesses that I kind of think, I wouldn't touch them again. If they came to us now, I wouldn't touch them now. Not for ethical reasons, because we were very clear about our ethical standpoint then. So, you know, if someone came to us, it didn't matter how much money they had, if they didn't meet our ethical values, we won't touch them. But still, we did work with some organisations, and you kind of think, how did I ever get into that? And nowadays, so I once went to a workshop that was run by a guy who had a lot more experience than me, who was a big marketing guru. And he said quite early on, after I'd started the business, he said, you know what, there's no better feeling than sacking a client. And I sort of looked at him and I thought, are you mad? I can't believe, what, really? Just tell a client to swing their hook? He said, yeah. I said, okay. Anyway, about 6 months later, did exactly that. You know what, he was right. There is no better feeling because they grind you down, they affect morale in the team, they treat you badly, they treat you really, really badly, and you shouldn't have to put up with it. And after a while, you kind of put up with it, you kind of think, oh, maybe I should just do it. But then after a while, I just thought, you know what, we are not doing that. And yeah, and that comes with confidence. It comes with confidence, it comes with time. And yes, we are in a better position now where we can be more picky. And I know that's an advantageous position to be in. And when you're starting out, it's not so easy. But I would always say, if you can, try and always be true to yourself. And if you think, you know, if this is grinding you down and really affecting you badly, stop doing it. It's not worth it.
I totally agree with that. Normally the ones where you get a funny feeling in your bones turn out to be the ones you wish you'd never engaged with. Kelechi, you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask the final question online, in person? Ominous silence.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was a bit busy. So yeah, I wanted to ask a few questions about, you know, if you're operating in a multicultural environment like the UK. I mean, I'm from Africa, and you know, my business is a bit more cultural oriented. So how do I get to, you know, let other people understand what I want to sell to them? Because my sort of business is a bit cultural. So how do I get new people from different cultural background to sort of, you know, identify with my culture and, you know, try part of my product as well to know what it feels like?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I kind of think with all of these sorts of things, when you've got a product or a service, you've got to demonstrate why, you know, why someone would want to buy it or to pay for it. And you've got to be really, really clear about what the benefits of it are. So, you know, if, you know, this Chili's got water bottle, someone had to convince me that this was worthwhile me buying. rather than a plastic one that when it's out in the sun, my water's going to get too warm and it's going to taste horrible. But they convinced me that actually having cold water in a bottle really makes a massive difference. You know what? Yeah, 25 quid. Yeah, well, yeah, I'll pay for that. But they convinced me that actually keeping my water cold in the hot weather was important to me. And that's why I bought it.
Yeah.
So, you know, so you've got to think, even if your business and your products or your service is very culturally focused in your own culture, you've got to try and find a way of demonstrating why it could be valuable and important and of benefit to other people, to the wider audience.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Right.
You just sort of following up on that, would you therefore maybe perhaps think about if you had a product, then you were looking at multiple cultures and there were significant differences, you might sort of treat them as separate customer profiles, not profile in one country, profile another, or, you know, you do, I know we often, as Europeans, we have got a lot of similarities, but when you step out into other continents, you know, there are significant cultural value changes. You might look at them differently.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, because, you know, if your audience is different, then you would approach it in a completely different way. So you might have completely different approaches depending on who your audience is and where they are and what motivates them. So definitely.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Kevin. We're going to